Welcome back, people, to another episode of Talkin Lost. A very, very good episode that we're covering today. The 23rd Psalm. We finally get the backstory of the very large, very mysterious, but very significant character, Mr. Echo, in this episode. At the end of this episode, we will also be giving you guys a preview of our summer slate because infamously, this is the final weekend in April. This is the final weekend before the kickoff of the summer slate. Thunderbolts releases next weekend, and then we will officially be into summer blockbuster season as we wind down everything that we've been working on towards the spring. Luke, you got anything to say before we get this started?
No, other than that, this is probably one of the better backstory episodes for me.
Most definitely. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin Lost. All right, people. So, season 2, episode 10, the 23rd Psalm. So, what I like to look at this episode as is if season 1 was kind of, again, just getting to know all of the characters and their relative backstories as they're kind of just learning to survive on this island, and there weren't really too many kind of overhanging arcs. Season 2, I would say, is split into kind of like, I would say, 4 major arcs, I would say. So we wrapped up arc 1 officially last week, right? Where you had you had the overhanging plot line that was established in the pilot episode, the man of science, man of faith, with the introduction of the hatch and the pushing of the button every 48 minutes or so. Then you have kind of, again, the introduction of the Talkin survivors, Michael, Jin, and Sawyer making their way back to the island, meeting the Talkin survivors, learning that they were on the plane, and then kind of the journey back to the mainland survivors. And then obviously that resulted in the events of the last 2 episodes. Now we're kind of transitioning into the next part, which, as we see in this episode, is going to be, unfortunately, kind of a little bit of a heel turn in wrestling terms for Charlie, kind of as presented through the guise of Mr. Echo, as we, again, as Charlie even says, now that these Talkin survivors, who we weren't even aware were had survived on this other end of the island, have now been incorporated into the main island survivors, how that's going to kind of twist and turn things on its head. You also have Michael is starting to get just a little bit too restless as far as, maybe wanting to go after Walt, and as far as, once again, being noticed by nobody except for John Locke, the most perceptive person on the island, who was the only one to ever notice the things that nobody else seems to. But again, this is, I said at the beginning, this is Echo's backstory. We finally get to know who he was, and also as well, again, kind of tying into our pre-stream discussions a little bit. This is an episode that shows everything is tied together as we finally learn kind of the identity, if you will, of that infamous smuggler's plane that got Boone killed, that Locke was trying to use to open the hatch last season. And now we finally know it was related to Mr. Echo. Again, for all long-time Lost fans who know, it was infamously Echo, who was a drug lord. His brother, who ended up becoming a priest, he attempted to use his brother's connections in the Catholic priesthood to smuggle drugs out of Nigeria. His brother attempted to stop him at the last minute, but was unfortunately shot by the military police. Echo got him onto the plane in order to save his life, but then the other drug runner kicked him off the plane. And because he was still dressed in priest clothes, he was able to kind of escape from there. And now, unfortunately, we kind of see again how everything's tied together. Luke, as I asked you before in the pre-stream discussion, and now I'm going to ask you again for the actual purposes of the stream, did you at all in any way expect that that the smuggler's plane was going to come back in this way?
I think when the plane first showed up, it felt like this sort of almost game-like thing. Like, okay, you've discovered this part of the map, and there's a plane here. What does that plane signify? I guess we'll find out later, or at least we will come back to it in some way. Like it's too contrasting to the jungle environment to be forgotten about. And obviously, it does come back later. And as soon as Mr. Echo was like, "Hey, where'd you find this Virgin Mary statue?" I'm like,
"You're like,
he's connected to the plane." Like that's the beauty of Lost, where everything is somehow connected. And when the writers do actually reveal something to you for once, it's like it feels so earned because they've laid it out so well. But then sometimes it does surprise you in such a manner as it did here, and I was like, oh, this is great sci-fi TV.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, like Lost has had this really interesting instance. You're right. I love that metaphor too. The idea of like this treasure map of all of these different kind of like icons, and like the Black Rock, which they discovered was like this ancient like Spanish conquistador pirate ship from like mid 1800s, something like that. And that will come back, and we will eventually discover what that is. Again, there's this temple on the other side of the island. There's this lighthouse. All of these kind of different things that these landmarks on the
You're
island.
teasing me. You're teasing
Oh,
me.
yes, yes, as the show does many times too. But all these different kind of landmarks on the island, and you eventually, again, come to discover what each of them mean and how each of them came to be there. And again, some of which don't get paid off until the last season, but that's the power of the show. It really is one of the few shows that rewards your time that you've spent investing in this show. And what's so interesting about a character like Echo is that Echo, again, he's this big, massive, imposing force, but also this strange source of wisdom, too. Like he was kind of, for lack of a better word, the tail end survivor's John Locke. He was always the one looking at the alternate perspective. He was always the one that would make the decisions that you would least expect to come from a guy like him, but would always end up benefiting everybody for the whole. He was the one that realized, like, yeah, we need to get Sawyer back. And he kept saying, like, oh, I'm not doing it for him. And he would keep drawing it. And also in the collision episode, when he was talking Jack down from wanting to go after Ana Lucia and them, being like, it was an accident, and you guys going after them with guns is not going to solve anything at all. And so you've constantly been wondering how, again, such a big, imposing figure who hits people with a stick, and it comes off
the Jesus stick, as Charlie calls it.
Exactly. He may or may not be religious. You're like, what is this guy's deal? And we really haven't had this sort of a mystery, I would say, since season 1. Again, this is very similar to Collision in the sense of the reason why I feel like those two episodes stand out is those are season 1 episodes, structured like season 1 episodes, placed in the middle of season 2. I feel like Abandon as well also kind of sort of worked like that, but that one was more, again, like a build up to a shock reveal. So again, like tying in, I guess, getting into the main plot on the island. So you have kind of Echo, he's approached by Claire, who asks him about the stick, whatnot. She casually drops, the fact that, she's like, oh, Charlie's religious, but I think that, but he won't admit it to me because of that Virgin Mary statue that he's carrying around. And Echo immediately like shocks his head. He's like, Virgin Mary statue. He's like, and he immediately goes over to Charlie and he's like, where did you get this? And it's another one of those classic Lost-isms where it's like, a character is like forcing the story along, but not revealing why. It's one of those things where it's like, it kind of only works as part of a TV show because any regular character would be like, no, I'm not going anywhere doing anything until you tell me what the hell is going on. But obviously, there's also a massive size advantage, and Charlie does have some understanding that, if he doesn't do what Echo says, Echo will like grind his skull into a pulp with his bare hands if he wants to. So you kind of have that little interesting size dynamic there. But what this does is, again, it's, like I said, we have unfortunately been being set up for a Charlie heel turn for a while now. Ever since Saeed, without having any knowledge of Charlie's addiction problems, unintentionally revealed what was actually in the Virgin Mary statues in the smuggler's plane in the season 1 finale, Exodus. We've kind of been being set up for this for a long way now, and now it's starting to come to fruition where Echo is so hell-bent on finding the plane and finding the source of the Virgin Mary statues in order to confirm this, that he doesn't realize just how much he's damaging the relationships that Charlie has formed, where regardless of how much Charlie has changed, whether he's just keeping the Virgin Marys, whether it's that classic, addicts thing of, oh, like I'm keeping the drugs in order to prove to myself that I don't need them, a classic addicts behavior pattern, if you will. It's a matter of it's kind of like Pandora's box. Once it's been opened, you can't put the 7 deadly sins back in the box. Freaking Claire. Unfortunately, a line has been crossed with Claire. Charlie and Claire have had problems in the past, obviously, but nothing like this. Like Claire obviously knows that about his addiction issues in the past. But now she's like, wait, there is an entire supply of heroin that was just lying in the jungle, and you never thought to bring that up once, or that this Virgin Mary statue that you were carrying around near my infant child contained bags of heroin. It's not good. So I just wanted your thoughts on that whole breakdown scenario there. It's fascinating to say the least.
Yeah, because we haven't really been with Charlie much throughout this season. Like he's had his moments here and there. We have had the seeds planted of the heel turn, but this was like probably the biggest, most significant episode for him, and putting him with like a polar opposite character like Echo, I think that Lost is really good at doing that. He's putting these these pairs of characters together in order to for the most development. And I think there was a small line about Charlie talking about his brother, Echo talking about his brother. So I thought, okay, there's a cool little parallel going there, and then eventually that does fold into Charlie like going back to his comically large stash, if you will, of
Yeah.
Virgin Mary statues. So I'm curious to see just how far off the deep end he goes regarding that. But him and Echo really have some big adventures throughout the island, including a very clear look
Yes.
at one recurring presence,
Indeed,
so to
indeed.
say.
Yeah, you can tell the CG budget got up just enough for them to
Oh yeah,
actually be able to show it. I'll get back to that in a bit, but you mentioned obviously Charlie's comically large stash, because that's the thing too. Up until this point, we thought that he was only carrying around the one statue they recovered from the plane with Saeed. We didn't know that he had that large of a stash. So that reveal at the end, you're kind of just like, oh, it's one of those instances where you're conflicted, because again, we love Charlie so much as a character because of everything that he's been through with season one, and his backstory and his relationship with his brother, and how we spent all of season one watching him try to improve himself as a person, both on the island and in flashbacks. It was constantly hindered by it. And, it's Dominic Monaghan, so we already have this pre-existing, so he's one of the few actors going into the show that we had this pre-existing relationship with because of Lord of the Rings. And now it's kind of, again, like Lindelof playing with our expectations, be like, oh, you love this guy so much, but he is an addict and they are still capable of this. And we are trying to show all gamuts of human behavior here, because that's what makes for the best stories. And yeah, it's a surprise to say the least, but it's definitely a good way to keep the story going, because again, if you just resolve this arc in this one episode, obviously again, you have like, it would just be like, oh, Charlie once again like has to make up to Claire, but now this is taking things in a very interesting direction. And myself, as having already seen the show and knowing where this storyline is going to go, in 2 episodes there's going to be an episode called The Long Con that sees Charlie pulling off something that you would never expect from him. And that's all that I'm going to leave it at that. But back to Echo real quick, like you were saying, again, Echo, and another again, like, so as if we didn't already have enough to go on base that Echo is the John Locke of the tail end survivors. This confirmed it, because again, we got another very interesting parallel that goes all the way back to the pilot, if I'm not mistaken, when we saw John see clearly the smoke monster coming out of the jungle. But at that time, we only saw it from his viewpoint as the camera, as the smoke monster was going to his face. This time, we're a year later, the budget's up a little higher. This time, now, you see Echo get a clear face up with the smoke monster when it comes out of nowhere. First with the little like snake noises, and then with the explosions out of the ground and the machine
the
noises.
Evil Dead type tracking, which
exactly
never get sick of that.
Yeah, you never get sick of it. There's a reason why it gets used over and over again. But Echo stares that thing down, like stares it down. It does not flinch until it moves away. And again, tying into the higher religious angle, again, I believe I have told you before that there will be a point in the show. Again, the island is not purgatory. They are not dead. It is a real place. But there is a point in the island when they will come across a Jesus-esque figure. For any of the lost heads who know about Jacob, they know that he is coming, not until later on, but he is coming. And the smoke monster, that's all that I'm going to say, Echo being as religious as he is shown in his flashbacks, there is a reason why he is able to stare that thing down without flinching. Unfortunately, that may not protect him later on in the show, but for now, at the very least, God is on his side. And what's so interesting too, also, is how that ties into his backstory, where again, the thing that makes Echo such an interesting character is he's got such this interesting backstory where he's revealed to be this heinous warlord who has no problem taking lives at all. But as he says, when he meets his brother again after many years, his reasoning for it was always for that of survival, because in the opening scene that we get in the episode, it shows like just a bunch of kids somewhere in Africa playing soccer before, unfortunately, a very common occurrence that happens all over the continent, happens where a bunch of gang members pull up and kidnap the children, and they force the one kid to try and kill one of the elders in the village. And this is, of course, revealed to be Yemi, Echo's brother, before Echo runs up, grabs the gun, and kills the old man in order to protect his brother. So Echo ends up being taken. We cut to years later. Echo's now a warlord, and he is still, I guess, trying to do some good, but not really. Where again, his brother, who is now a priest, is calling him out on this constantly. Where he's like, "You claim to be doing this for the betterment of Nigeria, but we all know you're really just doing this for money, you know. So let's not pretend like you're doing this for righteousness, you
Yeah,
know."
he's like a good warlord. Like he'll shoot the gangsters, but he won't shoot the kids. He has boundaries
Right.
that maybe most drug lords don't. But that's this almost hypocrite type contradiction of Echo. That yes, I'm doing good, but I'm also a drug lord. So it's that kind of like yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, again, it's another one of, but again, this is another reason why Lost is so good, why TV at this time is so good, because it shows once again that like you can't keep trying to play both sides. Eventually, it will come back to bite you in the ass, because even though he forces his brother to sign the papers in order to let them, smuggle the drugs out of the country under the guise of a church mission, so that they can avoid the military. His brother still calls the military. The irony being that his brother, while attempting to do good, ends up getting killed, right? Because it's the military police that kill his brother, not Echo or his drug lords. And then, as Echo says, when he sees the one drug lord who tried to parachute out of the plane, and that was the body that he found in the woods before he discovered his brother's body in the plane, he's like, this is the man who saved my life. Because again, the one drug lord kicked him out of the plane before he had a chance to get on. I'm assuming so that he could like keep some of the profits for himself, whatever the case may be. But he ended up doing Echo a favor, because if Echo gets on that plane, he's just another dead body in the woods on the island, but now he has but now he gets the chance to kind of like have the goodbye with his brother that he never had beforehand. So once again, Lost, giving us some of the best most human stories from the most unexpected places. And then we have the B plot of this episode, which again, this is the setup plot for setting us up for kind of the next couple of episodes worth of character arcs, where you see Michael in the hatch with Locke. He seems to be asking Locke just normal questions. Locke discovers like that there's a secret container with more guns in there that he's changing the combination for. Just trying to ensure that no one person could walk in and just take guns whenever they want. And Michael's asking a couple questions that, of course, gets Locke thinking like, Michael, you wouldn't happen to be asking me all these questions so you can sneak off into the jungle on your own and go after Walt, would you? Because this is the other thing too that I completely forgot to mention this in last week's episode when Michael's exploring the hatches. Michael, despite being told that, the computer can only be used to punch in the 6-digit code in order to reset the timer, in order to stop the island from exploding, Michael somehow is able to communicate with Walt through the computer. Now, whether that's
seemingly Walt.
Seemingly Walt, exactly. Whether that's actually Walt or whether, who knows, it could be just more island trickery. But whatever the case is, Michael's got enough juice, enough ammo to be willing to risk everything to go back into the jungle to save his son. So what did you think of that one?
Yeah, it was kind of like very abrupt at the end of the episode, which why we forgot to mention it. But now he's like, it's his secret, like Jack almost sees the chat almost, but the screen goes black before he does. There's that little mini tension of, ooh, like, okay, this is going to lead somewhere eventually, like as soon as next episode, because I always read the Netflix description of the next episode to get me ready for next week. So
yeah,
that's gonna push the plot forward. As you said, they have characters that force the plot forward. This will be Michael going into the jungle, enforcing the others to follow suit towards the others and the rest of the island. So I'm very looking forward to that. Just to go back to what you said about like Echo and how his story folds into this. Also, another Stephen King quote that I'm going to pull. That he writes stories about ordinary people and in extraordinary situations. I think that perfectly describes Lost as well. So it's these regular people with all these tragic backstories. Like they all have tragedy in some way, but they're all here for some kind of reason.
Yes.
And to go back to the plane, now we know that it's from Nigeria. How did it get here? That is my next question.
Yes, that is the question, which I will say right off the bat, that may or may not be answered, because unfortunately, if there's one thing that the show really tried hard to get, but I don't necessarily know if it quite got there, it's how people actually get to the island, because there's a lot of different ways to get to the island, but it's one of those things where the writers were like, we could like go out of our way to come up with all these wacky mechanics that involve bending the laws of space-time continuum in order to get to the island, or we could just kind of like do what we usually do, which is give a bunch of hints and let the audience figure it out for themselves. So I'll just let you know there. Like I said, my goal with this is to all the mysteries that do have answers to set you up for them, and all the mysteries that they really don't try to answer just to get that out of the way right there, then and there, because you're going to see not necessarily in this season, but in the next couple seasons, there are a lot of different instances of people who just show up on the island. You're like, how did they get there? And they kind of sort of.
I can live with that. The storytelling is good enough that I can live without that.
And it's actually so funny too, because literally I was texting a friend of mine. He's like, "Yo, I finished it. That ending sucked." I'm like. And I'm just like, did you binge it? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, of course you think the ending sucked. You missed everything. He's like, it didn't answer anything. I'm like, the show tells you everything. You have to be paying attention, though. It's not holding your hand and telling you everything. He's like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm not going to go into detail because we're recapping this a week at a time for a reason. There was a reason why we do these recaps a week at a time. Because if you binge the show, you're going to miss shit. It's just going to happen. The human attention span is the worst that it has ever been, and it is only going to keep getting worse. So, oh, man. So, before we get out of here, Luke, as everybody probably knows, like I said, we didn't have a big movie to watch this week. I didn't get a chance to watch Havoc yet on Netflix.
I didn't either.
But I've heard very good things about it. I'm very excited to watch it. It's from the director of The Raid, so we will be getting to that. I also missed Accountant 2 last night. I was just way too tired. But we have officially, this is our last weekend of April. This is the last weekend of the spring. And even though I know summer doesn't technically start until June, the summer movie season is upon us, people. That's right. And the summer of 2025, after I would say a pretty rough start to the year of movies overall, it's an interesting slate, to say the least. It is definitely one of the most interesting summer slates that we've had.
It's at least a dense slate.
It is a dense slate, yeah.
Like, all I ask for is the dense slate. Like,
after the summer of no movies, the summer where every big movie went to streaming, the summer where we only had 5 movies, the summer where we had a lot of pretty big movies, but they were mostly all IP, and for the most part, they all flopped except for Barbenheimer. And last summer, which I still don't even know what to make heads or tails of last summer, where like Deadpool and Wolverine and Inside Out 2 were like the only box office hits and everything else flopped. And also the summer of Twisters and weird summer.
Shout out Twisters.
Weird summer last summer. So we have with us officially, let me pull it up, our summer slate. So I'm just going to run that through for you guys right here. So
seeing the first movie that you will mention on Wednesday.
Yes, I'm going to be attempting to see it on Thursday. So on Monday, May 5th, when I get back from Nashville, we will be reviewing Thunderbolts, Asterisk, New Avengers. We all know what that is. Then May's a little bit of a weird one this year because some of the titles that are being released are Friendship from A24 with Paul Rudd and Tim Robinson. And then the weekend after that, you have the double release of Final Destination, Bloodlines, and Hurry Up Tomorrow starring The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan. It's just a weird May. But Memorial Day weekend, Sunday, the 25th of May, we will, of course, be reviewing as the cap to our Mission Impossible rewatch series, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. Will it be the final time we see Tom Cruise pull off these ridiculous stunts? We will have to see. Then we have the week after that, June 8th, we have a double release of Ballerina and The Life of Chuck. Remind me again, are you guys getting The Life of Chuck or no?
No sign of it.
Okay, yeah, because that's a neon release, so that might have to be a little bit of a smaller one there. Then we will not be reviewing Elio, unfortunately. I may or may not be reviewing Materialist with Kristen the week after, but then 2 weeks after that, the last 2 weekends of June are going to be very, very interesting. June 22nd, we will be doing 28 Years Later, the third installment in the 28 trilogy. Danny Boyle.
What date did you say it was? I think we get it a week later.
You get a week. June 22nd is when we're getting 28 Years Later.
Stand by.
Unless they change the release date on us.
Yeah, we get it 27th.
You got it the 27th. Okay, so in that case,
I gotta watch that in F1 on the same weekend.
Oh no! Oh man, it looks like that one's gonna be.
And Megan 2 looks interesting.
It looks like that one's going to be a double release. Damn, because that was going to lead into my next one, June 29th, F1. Damn, they are screwing you guys with these release dates over there. Man. Oh, man. That. So which one of those are you looking forward to more, 28 Years Later or F1? I mean, I know the answer,
it's a bit of a unbalanced situation, I think. I think you should find someone to cover 28 Years Later.
Okay.
And I'll pop on in the F1 weekend to talk about it briefly.
Got it. That sounds good. I'll do that. I might contact Helen because I think she said she was interested in that. But yeah, and then like I said, F1 the final weekend of June, and then we get into July. And really in July, there's really only three big 3 big releases because I will be in Italy when Eddington releases, so I will not be able to cover that in real time. I may be able to do that at a later point, but the 3 big releases, July 4th weekend, July 6th will be Jurassic World Rebirth. You and I will be, since we'll both be seeing it early, and since I'll be leaving that day, we're going to be covering Superman on the morning of Friday, July 11th. That will be a little bit of an early one, and then the final weekend of July 27th. So that Monday that I get back, because I'll have a wedding that week, and we will be doing Fantastic Four First Steps. And those are the majority of the big summer releases. Like I said, we'll have some fun ones that we'll cover in August, but for the most part, those are like the big tentpole titles that I want to hit for the summer. We're going to see how those titles hold up, obviously, compared to previous summer titles. We'll see how this summer box office turns out. And then obviously, we'll still be recapping Lost as well every weekend too. Because like I said, we are covering, like I said at the beginning, once we started, we are covering Lost every single weekend until the end of the year, so that we can knock out seasons 2 and 3 this year, so that we can finish the show and wrap it in 2026. So that's it. That was a recap of Lost. That was our summer slate. Keep tuning in. Like I said, we are still churning out these Mission Impossible rewatches. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is recorded and edited. That will be up and released tomorrow morning. And I am currently in the edit for Rogue Nation as well. And then when I get back from Nashville, we will be recording Fallout and Dead Reckoning Part 1. Do we even call it Part 1 anymore, or is it just like Dead Reckoning now? Like, I don't know, because
I think on the Blu-rays it's still Part 1.
Because they still have the Part 1 on some of the titles, so I don't know like what to call it, because this is no longer Dead Reckoning Part 2. It's the Final Reckoning. Still, the smartest decision they could have possibly made for this movie. But oh man, so Luke, as always, my partner in crime, where can the people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. I handed in pretty big assignment on Friday, so now I have a little more time to start writing that mission video. I plan to get it out before the 23rd, so that gives me about 3 and a bit weeks, which is plenty of time.
Yes, sir. Very much looking forward to that. And of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. You guys know the rest. We will see you guys next week for the beginning of the summer season with Thunderbolts. Will it hold up to the hype? We shall see. But in the meantime, people, get lost. We'll see you guys next week.